BR and industrial locomotives, part of my fleet. So we have the Holden 101 in the Santa livery, and then we have the Holden 101 in the Coleman's livery with one rod. They're both by Hornby. Then we have, I think it's a D class, an LER D class, but in the LMS livery. I think it could also be slightly freelance as well. And then we have, it should say British Railways, if you can read that. Again, it's the same sort of loco as the LMS one. And then we have the Eddie Stobart one as well. Quite a collector's item. Then we have the Peckett W4 by Hornby. And then we have the National Coal Board B2 Peckett again by Hornby. And then we have, I think this is a slightly freelance Collectors Club locomotive in the British Railway lined livery. For a small loco, it doesn't look too bad. And then we have TRYIN Polly. Hornby Railroad 9F Evening Star custom weathered. Hornby Railroad Francocrosti 9F again custom weathered. Then we have Stevenson's Rocket in this middle there, again Hornby. I didn't know where to put this one. And then behind that we have the Bachmann Standard Class 5 City of Peterborough as preserved, if it was preserved, but this is the weathered version again. Standard Class 6MT or Clan Class, and this is Clan Stewart, and this is another Hornby locomotive in Brunswick Green. Then we come to a couple of Bachmann locomotives, and these are WDs. We have one here in the Longmore military livery. These are 280s, and then we have a weathered one, factory weathered by Bachmann in BR livery. I think it's an early crest one there. Southern Collection now. Battle of Britain class by Hornby, so Winston Churchill. This was a custom made locomotive. It was Tanmere originally. I just had the name and renumbered done. It was quite a nice locomotive for an old tooled one. Then we have another old tooled locomotive from the same era, which is 2000. And this is a Merchant Navy class, again by Hornby. And I think this is Blue Star or something like that. I think it's a preserved locomotive anyway. The only issue with this one is it's missing its whistle. That's why I haven't reviewed it. It's just simply missing its whistle. Then we come on to some West Country classes. And this is a limited edition one for the exchange charge, I think 1948. And it has a Stanier tender on the back with British Railways on the tender. And this is a West Country class, like I said, it's Bude. And then next to that we have another fine West Country class, again by Hornby. And this is Cloverley, and this is custom weathered by TRS. He did a few custom weathers for me. And this is one of them, and this is probably one of the best he's done for me. Some more Hornby Merchant Navies now, and these are in the original condition. And first one is in wartime black, and it's Aberdeen Commonwealth, which is quite a nice livery. Actually, quite like that one. Moving along again, original built. We have the Hornby, I think it's Royal Mail. It's called again, original condition, but in southern green, which is nice. Then we have an N15 weathered, custom weathered. And its name is Sir Sagemore, and its number is 771. And then next to that, we have an S15 in BR Early Black, not named. Hornby M7 in London South Western Railway livery, and this is from the National Railway Museum. This is quite a nice locomotive, some nice features in that one. Then we move across, and this is the new tooled Hornby Terrier. Stepney, this one is quite a nice model, better than the old version. And then speaking of the old version, we have a Collectors Club version, which is Sutton. I think it's in the preserved livery. The old tooling isn't too bad. They're a little bit chunky in places, but they ain't too bad. You can get a lot of projects out of them. Then again, we have another Collectors Club item. And it's the original version of Sutton, and it was Whitechapel in the engine-proof green, I believe it is. And then we move on to something slightly bigger. And this is the fantastic Hornby Lord Nelson class, and this is Lord Rodney in Brunswick green with the early emblem on the tender. Then next up we have a railroad locomotive, and this is a V class or a schools class, and this is Cheltenham, which I think is preserved. Here we have a South East and Chatham Railway C class, and this is by Bachmann. Then we have, which is quite small, we have a Hatton's P class, again in the South East and Chatham Railway livery. It's quite a nice model, that one. Then moving along, we have a Hornby one, which is a H class. This isn't the preserved one, this is just a standard regular version. Then we have a Model Rail exclusive by Bachmann again, and this is the USA S100 or dock tank, and this version is preserved. Then we have the old Hornby E2. Again, it's an old version, it could do a retool. And then we have another Bachmann locomotive, you can just about see it there. And this is the E4, again in the London, Brighton and South Coast Railway livery. Same with the E2, just different shades. And here we have a Bachmann Atlantic, London, Brighton and South Coast Railway H1 La France in a pre-grouping livery. Then next to that we have another Atlantic, and this is the H2, not named at all, but it's a H2, again in the lined livery. And then we have a Hornby LSWR Drummond 700 class, or Black Motor, I believe they're called. And this is an early BR version as well. On to the LMS now. The LMS, we start with some pre-grouping locomotives, and these are Hornby Caledonian Pugs. We have one in the National Coal Board livery from the 80s. Moving along, we also have Smoky Joe, which I think is Chinese made. Again, it's from the train set Smoky Joe. It's the first one I got from Index. Then we have another Chinese made in the Caledonian Railway livery. And the blue looks quite nice. Like I said, they're all Hornby ones. I'm not sure on the class, I keep getting it wrong. And moving along, we have a Caledonian 812 by Bachmann, Railroad Sheffield. Again, we have a BR version just there, Caledonian 812 again. And it's later livery weathered as well. Next up, we have some Bachmann locomotives in the pre-grouping locomotives as well. I'm starting off with this Midland Railway 1P. Fantastic detail, lovely runner. Then moving along, we have its sister locomotive in the Somerset and Dorset Joint Railway locomotive livery. This is a Collectors Club from Bachmann. Looks stunning. Then we have a Midland Railway 1F in the British Railway livery, and it's got a half a cab. Then we have a Lancashire and Yorkshire Railway livery, and I think it's in the LMS livery, this one. This is a Class 5, it's a 242 locomotive. Then we have a Hornby or Dapple style Lancashire and Yorkshire Railway Class 21, I think it's a Pug, but in the Class 21s. These do need a retool, but mine's a fantastic runner. And then we have a Stania 8F by Hornby, which has been weathered. Could do with a retool, but it's there and I like it. Next up, we have some more Bachmann pre-grouping locomotives, and this one is the LNWR Improved President class, exclusive to Railroad Sheffield, and this is look now. It's quite nice in this livery. Moving along a little bit more, we do have another Bachmann, like I said, and this is a T2A, and it is a LNWR one as well in its BR livery. It's quite an unusual locomotive, but it's nice. And then we have another Bachmann one, and this is the Webb coal tank. This is the preserved one in its livery, I believe, as it is now. And this is a 062. And then next to that we have another Bachmann, and this is a LMS Jubilee class. And this one is the fine country of Australia. Next up is another Bachmann pre-grouping locomotive, this time in a BR livery. And this one is the Midland Railway class 3835 class, or the 4F I think as well. It's very different to the Fowler design. Moving along, it's another Bachmann one, and this has been custom weathered by TRS. This is the Somerset Dorset Joint Railway 7F, and it's in this BR livery again. Then we have a Bachmann Ivert Class 4, which is a mogul design, if you have that correct. Again, in a BR livery. Then just over there, we have a Hornby Railroad Black 5 in its LMS livery. This Black 5 is wrong, it's not the retooled one that Hornby brought out around 2015, 2010. This is the really, really old one from the 70s. Next up, we have some Hornby locomotives, and this is the recently released retooled version of the Princess Royal class, or Princess class, depending on your preference. And this is in the Experiment Blue livery that BR did. And I believe this is Princess Louise Marie or something like that. This is all new, like I said, with the flickering firebox and all the rest, and vents that move. Then next to that, we have the one that came before it, which is, this is Princess Elizabeth in a TRYIN livery, in a BR livery. It was to celebrate, I think, 50 or 60 years of TRYIN, and it was a limited edition. It's quite a nice locomotive, nothing wrong with it whatsoever with the tooling. Then next to that, we have a Coronation class, and we have the Coronation herself, 6220, and this is an old tooled version as well. And then all the way over there, we have a Coronation or Duchess, depending on your preference. This is in Brunswick Green, and this is Princess Alexander, and it also has the slope just before the chimney, and this is old tool again. Next up, we have a really old tooled Hornby Duchess here. This is from the 80s, and this is Margate built, and this is the City of St. Elbs, and it was a limited edition set, and you got a plate with it from Royal Adultery, I believe. So it's a nice set in the LMS Black Wartime. Speaking of Wartime Black, we have another Hornby locomotive, and this is the City of Edinburgh as a Coronation locomotive, and it's in Wartime Black, plain, but it looks the part. I quite like it. Then we have a Duchess or Coronation again. I think it's early BR livery, Brunswick Green. I think this is King George VI. It's VI or something like that. I think it's King George VI. I always get my Roman numerals mixed up. Then we have a Bachmann Hughes Crab in the LMS livery, and this one is a fantastic runner. Next up, we have a Bachmann Ivert 2MT class. This is a mogul wheel configuration, and this is in a BR Early Crest livery. Then we have a Hornby Railroad locomotive, Patriot class. I think it's Lustrious. I think that's what it is. And like I said, it's a railroad one, and it's old tooled, but it runs pretty well. Next, we have another railroad locomotive, and this is the Midland Compound 1000. This is really old tooled. It still runs pretty well. Then next to that, we have a Bachmann Fairburn in a BR livery again. Great Western, we have a Hornby 61XX Prairie Tank, I believe it is. Then moving along, we have the Hornby Holden 101 in its Great Western livery. Then we have an Electron locomotive, and this is a Taff Vale, it's called, but I think it's a Spanish locomotive. But nonetheless, it's still a nice looking locomotive. Then we have a old tooled Hornby Terrier. This is Portish head with the shirt button on the tanks. Again, we have another Hornby locomotive, and this one is a 72XX. It's a 282. It's quite a big tank locomotive. And then we have a Oxford Rail Dean Goods in the Great Western livery with the Great Western and crest on the tender. We have a Bachmann pannier tank, I think it's a 57XX in the London Transport livery. Next up, we have another pannier tank, and this is in the Railway Children livery. I think it's Great Northern and Southern Railway or something like that. It's from the Railway Children from the classic film. It's a nice livery. Bachmann do make a great pannier tank as it stands. And then we have another Bachmann locomotive, and this is a Duke Dog or Earl class, depending on your preference. And this one is BR Early Crest, and it is weathered, factory weathered by Bachmann themselves. And then we have two Hornby locomotives, and we have the Hogwarts Castle class. These are the wrong type of locomotives. I got these before Hornby retooled them. The only difference between these two, it is quite simply the livery, as you can tell from here. One's a bit more darker, a bit more lighter. One has a light and one has a slightly enhanced livery, but they are the same tooling, and one's got traction tyres. Here we have a Bachmann Great Western 3000 class. This is like a Bachmann one, and it's a Great Central loco originally. It's a Robertson 04, but in Great Western green. Next we have some more Bachmann locomotives, and here we have the Bachmann City class, which these are fantastic. And this is in the lined Great Western livery with the crest of some description on the tender, and that is City of London. And over there we have another city class again, and this is City of Birmingham. This one came from the ambulance train set that Bachmann did the First World War one, and this is in the khaki livery, and it has Great Western on the tender as well. And then we have a Hornby old tooled King class. This is King Stephen. Like I said, this is an old tool. It's from about 2000, but it looks the part. Next up we have a Dapple locomotive, and this is a Dapple Mogul of 43XX in the Great Western green with Great Western on the tender. And this one is one of the best locomotives I have in my collection. Next up are two custom made locomotives, both Hornby sort of built. So up next we have a streamlined castle on the Hogwarts chassis. This is Camembert Castle or something like that. I think I've butchered that completely now. I know I was going to. But this is a streamlined version, and some people like it and some people don't. I like history, so I like it, obviously. The next up we have a streamlined King. I think this is King Henry VIII or 7th or something like that. These were done by a friend of mine at the time, and this has the shirt button on it. Maybe if the manufacturers in the future do decide to do them, I probably will sell one of them on. And there we have a Hornby Railroad Hall class. I think it's like Adley Hall. This is a lined livery. Like I said, this is a railroad. It cost me £55, and I always thank this guy, and I'll continue thanking him for getting this fantastic locomotive. And this is Jerry Allen. If you're watching, Jerry, thanks a lot, mate, for the bargain that you told me about for this great locomotive. Next up we have a Hornby locomotive, and this is a Hornby Grange class. And this is Derwent Grange. As you can tell, it's in the BR black, and it's an early emblem on the tender. Looks quite nice, if I'm honest. Moving along, we do have a railroad locomotive, and this is a 1000 class or county class, and this is County of Cornwall. It has the initials on the tender and a crest as well. Then we come to one of my older locomotives in my Great Western collection as of a model, and this is an Airfix Castle. This is Banbury Castle with the early emblem on the tender, and this was a renumbered and renamed locomotive. I think it before was Pendennis Castle. So that's Banbury Castle. And all the way at the back over there we have a Hornby Star class, and this is British Monarch. Again, early emblem on the tender, and again it's in green. LMS time now. Here we have a old tooled Hornby B12 locomotive. The next to her we have a Hornby A1 in its transitional livery from pre-grouping to grouping, and this is Great Northern herself with the LNER and the number on the tender. It's a fantastic loco, one of my best, I would say. And just there we have the all-new Bachmann V2 locomotive, originally built and livery. Then we have another Hornby locomotive here, and this is a B17, and this is Leicester City in its BR livery. Next up we have a couple of Hornby A3s and A1. We have a Brunswick green one here with a Great Northern tender, and that is Flying Fox. These are all tender-driven locomotives. Next to that, we have another Brunswick green one again, which is Blink Bonnie, and it hasn't got a Great Northern tender. Then this one over here is a Margate built one, and this is Prince of Palatine, I believe, and it's in the Express Blue with the early crest. Like I said, this is a Margate built one. And finally, we have over here for A3s and A1s, we have Flying Scotsman herself, and this one is a tender driven one, and it's basically a railroad version. I believe it's an A1 going by the small dome on the boiler. Next up, we have a Hornby Raven Q6 locomotive in the LNER black livery. Then we have this fantastic Rapido UK locomotive of the Stirling single number 1. Then next to that we have another pre-grouping locomotive. This one is by Bachmann, and it's the Atlantic C1 Great Northern class locomotive. And over there we have another Hornby locomotive, and this is the Thompson 01 locomotive in LNER black livery as well. Next up we have some tank engines, and the next one up is a Bachmann LNER J72 in its pre-grouping livery of the North Eastern Railway, which is an E1, and this one is in the wrong livery, so Bachmann say. It's a retooled version. Moving along, we have a cheaper option with full detailed, and this one is the Oxford Rail LNER N7 in its pre-grouping livery. I've just forgot what company it is. And then we have a Longmoor Military Railway, and this one is a Hornby one, and this is a LNER J94, got that correct. And then moving along, we have another pre-grouping locomotive, and this is a Hornby one, and this is the Great Northern, I think it's the J50, or LNER J50. And that's a pre-grouping one, and it's BR livery. Then over there we have a railroad locomotive, and this is LNER J83. It's quite cheap, quite basic. Then moving over there we have a Hornby again, and it's the LNER J36 locomotive with the L and NR on the tender and a number as well, and it is lined. Next up are some Hornby LNER locomotives, and we have a W1 here, which is a 464 locomotive. Next to that we have another unusual locomotive, and this is the LNER Railroad P2 Cook of the North. It's quite a nice model. The next to that we have Thompson's rebuilt P2s, which were the A2/2, I think, and that one is a Scottish named locomotive, Tamer 5, I believe. Next up we have a Hornby Great Northern Railway N2 class. This is a fantastic model. Then moving along we have another pre-grouping model by Hornby, and this is the Great Northern J13, if I got this correct, and this represents the NRM version with the same running number and all the rest. It's not official, but that's what it represents. And moving along we have this lovely little shed, as some people call it. This is the Rapido J70 in its northeastern livery, I believe. It's quite a nice model, quite one of the best actually. Then moving along we have another Hornby model, and this one is the J15, and it's a 060 tender locomotive. And then we have another 060 tender locomotive. I believe this is a Great Central locomotive by Bachmann, and I think it is the J11. Next up we have a Hornby Thompson Ala1 locomotive, and this is quite a nice one actually. This is a 264 tank locomotive. Moving along we have a Bachmann one next, and this is a factory weathered one by Bachmann in the BR livery, and this is a Great Central locomotive. It's a Robertson 04. Moving along we have a cheaper alternative from Oxford Rail, and this is the LNER J27 in its LNER livery. quite a nice locomotive. And all the way over there we have a Hornby K1 locomotive. I think it's a greatly designed. Next up we have some A4s by Hornby. We have Mallard there, which is a recent one. It's not a retool one, but it's a recent one. It's a loco driven one. And then next to it we have a Margate built tender version. And this is Seagull. They basically are night and day, but they're both lovely models. Next we have a Hornby Great Eastern Railway D16, I believe, got that correct. It's a 440 locomotive. Then next to that we have a Bachmann 440 locomotive. And this is a Great Central D11, sorry, in a BR livery. And that one is Prince Albert. And finally, we have the LNER Pacifics, and these are Peppercorn and Thompson ones. And this is a Bachmann A2 Peppercorn design, and this is Tudorminster in British Railways livery, apple green. Fantastic model. Moving along, we have a Hornby Thompson locomotive, and this one is a LNER A2/3 Edward Thompson. Fantastic model from Hornby and a great runner. Then we have another Hornby model, which is a Railroad Tornado, and this is a Peppercorn A1 design.